Welcome everybody to the Microsoft Excel MO-200 exam prep series on 20 July 2020. My name is Chintan Patel. I'm a Microsoft Office Specialist Expert Instructor from Benoni, South Africa. And we are continuing with our MO-200 exam prep series. These are my social media handles. If you would like to get hold of me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm also active on Instagram, Twitter. If you'd like to message me privately, I'm available on Telegram. My YouTube channel is also visible. That's where I put my videos up. I'll be sharing links again shortly. And my website, where I also post everything about myself. So these are the certifications that I have, and we also hopefully want to be achieving these certifications. That's the purpose of these lessons here. Hopefully we can start off at the Microsoft Office Specialist certification for Excel. We work our way up to Expert, and then we try other applications if we are interested. And ultimately we can get to the Microsoft Office Specialist Associate certification, or even the Specialist Expert where I am right now. Right, so we want to get those, and it's really the proof to show that you know Office really well. It's a proof to show that you have the necessary Excel skills to tackle any type of job, to tackle any sort of work that requires Excel, all measured against a set of objectives. Right, they're probably the only proof or piece of paper or certification that you can show that you know Excel really, really well. Because we are using Microsoft Teams, just familiarize yourself with the environment. All right, so if you do have a question, please raise your hand. You can speak up if you need to speak up, or you can just chat in the chat box, and I'll be looking at your messages from time to time. What I also like to show everybody is my very first international webinar. So I will be hosting a webinar alongside another colleague. I'll be hosting a webinar alongside another colleague, Vlad Katrinescu. He's a Microsoft MVP from Canada, and we'll be going through the Microsoft Office Specialist certifications. So this is your chance to actually have a look at what are the Microsoft Office certifications all about. What do you need to get there? Why should you get them? Right, so a whole lot of information about the Microsoft Office Specialist certifications. I will be sharing the link as well in the chat area, so we can go and register for that. It is happening on August the 13th, 2020 at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, US and Canada. If you're in South Africa, that is at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right, so please do register if you want to know more. It is going to be quite a packed session. We don't have a lot of these happening around Microsoft Office Specialist, so you definitely want to attend this over here. We do want to make sure that we always review the skills measured, or the set of objectives laid out for the exam. I stress this in every video that I make, in every lesson that I teach, that when we are preparing for such an exam, we must go through the objectives. The objectives tell us what we need to study, what we need to know, what we should be leaving out for this particular exam. Maybe it will be in the next exam. Right, so we want to really pay attention to this. Just by missing this out, we may get confused, we may get stuck, panic sets in, and we don't do as well as expected. Right, I've seen lots of things happening around that, and so we want to always make sure that the skills measured document or the exam objectives document is always looked at before doing any sort of preparation for the exams. And that goes for any Microsoft exam, or any exam for that matter. Every single exam does have a set of objectives. You do want to have a look at that before trying to attempt, or even before starting to study for it. So the set of objectives can be found on this particular site. Again, I'll be sharing these links in a moment. Right, so this is on Microsoft Learning platform, where it lays out the description, set of objectives, and what we need to do to actually get this particular certification. Before I start, let me share those links. All right, so this is a link to actually go to when we want to get the exam objectives. Right, that's that particular site there. My YouTube channel, once again, where I upload all of the necessary videos of all these sessions over here. Please do remember to subscribe to my YouTube channels. I work according to a set of exercise files. Right, so these exercise files are freely available at this particular link over here. These are exercise files that are representing a fictitious company. So we want to practice on these as much as we can. It really helps us for the exam preparation. You're welcome to just watch whatever I'm doing, or you're welcome to just follow along as well. And lastly, the link for the webinar. Right, so this is the link for the webinar. Please do register for this particular webinar. It will greatly benefit you if you in a company, to greatly benefit your employees. Maybe send it along to the HR department, maybe send it along to the department that is in charge of skills development and training. They want to maybe see a lot more information about our Microsoft Office Specialist program. So this will be a very informative session for them. So let us get started with our activities with the particular set of exercise files. So I am busy working in the Contoso inventory exercise file, which is going to be in our manage data cells and ranges subfolder. And what did we cover last week? Right, in the video that I covered last week, we were looking at flash fill, we were looking at paste, special, and transpose. We saw a bit of merge, unmerge, cell alignment, orientation, indentation, wrapping of text. So it really just makes our data set out very well, very professional looking, creates a great view. So there's a whole variety of ways to actually format your data in terms of alignment, in terms of positioning. We did apply currency formatting as well, and we were looking at a bulk erasing tool called Clear Format. So Clear Format is the tool to use, which is in the Home tab editing group, which allows you to go back to everything before you started formatting a certain cell or a range of cells. Right? We may continuously be clicking on the undo button, right? But that also erases things or undoes things in between. If we just want to get rid of formatting, we will use the clear format command for that. We also have clear all available, which is the same action as pushing delete on your keyboard. So what are we going to be looking at today? We're just going to continue with format painter, cell styles, and we'll move on to the next section shortly. So what I have here in the monthly data worksheet, I see that I have certain cells that have been formatted. It has this particular shade of blue, and I do want to continue or copy this particular formatting in all of my cells or the headings going across in row 6. Now, I probably may not know this particular shade of blue, or maybe if there's any specific styling that has been added, maybe the font or the font size. And I really don't want to go and figure all of that out. I want to rather take whatever I have available here and copy that formatting and paste across all the different column headings over here. For that, I can make use of a tool in my Home tab called the Format Painter command. And what does the Format Painter command tell us? The screen tip here says, like the look of a particular selection, you can apply that look to other content in the document. So it's almost like your copy and paste, but with your formatting. Right, so copies formatting from one source to a destination. Just note that content does not get copied over. Right? We're not duplicating any content. We're duplicating the design, duplicating the colors, duplicating the formatting, any formatting that has happened. All right, so we will just take one example, this March month where I have this shaded. So I click on the Format Painter command. Your cursor will change to a paintbrush of some kind, right? There's a little paintbrush appearing next to your selection cursor, and all you do is to click and drag on top of the destination, and it will apply your formatting on those particular cells. A very quick and easy way to get formatting from one particular source, cells that have already got some formatting into a specific destination. So it just really saves us time to figuring out what sort of formatting has been applied. You want to apply this consistent look across your document, across your spreadsheets. You may want to use Format Painter for that. It does give you some additional information in the screen tip here to apply the formatting in multiple places. Double-click Format Painter. So you could lock in the Format Painter and apply wherever you like to apply this particular set of formatting. So if I were to try that again, I can say select December here, double-click. I can apply it on total, I can apply it on trend. So these are also other column headings that I have. And whenever I'm done, I can just push the escape button and it will switch off the Format Painter. Right, and at any time you do think you made a mistake anywhere with formatting, right, you can probably use undo. But I did mention in the last video, you can use the clear format. Right? The clear format gets you back to whatever data we had before formatting actually was there in the first place. We now come to a section called Cell Styles. So this is in the Home tab Styles group. And Cell Styles is also very much underlooked at, we don't see it used very often. I haven't seen it used very often in a lot of places. And what Cell Styles is all about, it's pretty much Excel's recommendations on the type of formatting we may want to place on certain types of data. So let's say you need to create a report of some kind or spreadsheet. You need to use color to make it stand out really well. Maybe you have no idea what color to use, because honestly, we will spend a lot of time in this font group in the Home tab trying to figure out what font size I need to put in, the style, the size, any other formatting, bold, italic, underlines for emphasis, your fill color, your font color, maybe certain alignment, right? And we just spend so much time in that. If we don't like it, we have to undo and then do it again. Maybe we want to use cell styles as Excel's recommendations based on the sort of data we have. This is not, say, smart recommendations. There's no AI or anything built into this, but it's just simply informing us that if we have certain types of data inside our spreadsheet, we may want to apply these. Right, so it's a very quick way to get some formatting in. So we have certain types of formatting under your good, bad, and neutral category. So if you have data and you'd like to show performance, you may want to apply these three colors here where it has bad, good, and neutral. Bad has been shaded in red, good has been shaded in green, neutral has been shaded in some sort of yellow color here. So if we want to show performance and we allocate these specific colors to show specific types of performance, maybe red for bad performance, green for good performance, neutral for something in between, then we can apply those specific colors on our data. Right? So it's not a smart way, it figures out based on a certain calculation. We are coming to that. That's in conditional formatting, right? Based on certain criteria that our data gets colored in. However, this is just a manual selection. Under data and model, we may have specific types of data where if we color it in that way, it will stand out more. It will make more sense. It makes it more meaningful. For example, maybe in this particular worksheet over here, I want to try and inform the reader, inform the audience that the data that I have in front of me needs to be looked at differently in terms of I have these monthly values here, which are input values maybe. So they're sales data coming from an external system. Maybe they've been captured manually. We can see there's no formula or function behind any of these cells here. So I want to differentiate these cells from the formula related cells that I have over here. So in total, I'm going to have a formula, which we'll do as well. In this total here, this row, we're going to have formula as well. So I want to make it stand out for the person looking at this, informing them that the data that I have here already are possibly classified as input values, and then anything that has a result with a formula, with a function, can be classified with a calculation cell style. So it's a great way to separate your data in terms of colors. We could use conditional formatting. This is probably one step before conditional formatting, where, excuse me, I'm giving meaning to my data. So I want to apply color, but I want to apply color with meaning in there. So I could use one of these data and model categories over here. There's something called note, there's hyperlink, there's warning text output as well. There's another one called titles and headings, or another category there. So we have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, etc. And if we are not aware of this already, these types of headings, these styles here, have a very particular purpose. Right? So just to give you a bit of a background on what these all actually mean. So we have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and heading 4. Right? So if we have text as formatted as heading 1, it tells the application Excel, Word, or PowerPoint, or Outlook, any one of those, that the text that you have in front of you is quite primary, right? Showing the most importance. Showing the most importance. So it is, so let's say, right at the top, if you want to just put some sort of positioning aspect there. So it is an important heading. Anything formatted as heading 1 will also probably be have the largest font size, right? It will have a lot of emphasis. So your worksheet, spreadsheet headings over here, your main document title, the main document heading, will be formatted as heading 1. And as we go down heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, the level of importance drops. So heading 2 is secondary. The next level of importance, right? It's after heading 1, slightly smaller font size, slightly less emphasis. So it goes from heading 2 all the way up to heading 9. Right? So we activate everything after heading 4 if we really need it. Usually, from the data I've seen, heading 4 should be sufficient. Right? It depends on the the amount of importance you'd like to give to certain parts of your documents or your spreadsheet here. So an example would be that you may want to give this particular heading here, Contoso Country Sales, a heading 1 style. And then the headings in the left-hand pane here and at the top where we have all the months, we may want to apply heading 2. It is a heading, it is important, but slightly less important than the heading 1 that I have here in cell A1. So those are the different cell styles available for titles and headings. We also have something called title. We may want to format total specifically. And then we have some themed cell styles according to a certain accent, according to a certain color palette available inside Excel. So if we ever want to just apply a certain color, we can do that. We can also choose our own colors. We can create a new cell style. we'll be prompted to give it a name. So actually, let's go have a look at that. We don't actually go into great detail with this, but what you can do, what sort of styles you'd like to apply. Like I said, you give it a name, you go to format. You can go and choose your own colors if you want to put them in. If you go to more colors, you can put custom colors according to an RGB model or to some other model available. So you can actually set this up where you need to maybe follow a corporate identity. Maybe you need to follow company specific colors. You need to show your brand. You can set up your very own styles that you want to use to have that consistent look that you are marketing your company really well. I do a whole lot of this in the PowerPoint course, because PowerPoint is all about presentation, making your company look good, making your product look good, making yourself look good with all of those formatting elements. So we go much more into depth with our setting of colors and creating our own colors using these custom color formats. So we look at hex standards and RGB, CMYK, all those particular terms we will see in the PowerPoint course. Right. It is also there in Word. It is also there in Excel. I give much more focus in the PowerPoint course, but in the other exams, there is a focus on there. When we get to that particular point, I will talk about that. Right, but for now, we just want to apply some simple cell styles. We may be asked to apply some of these in our exam. Right, so it's a good idea just to have a look at the names of these accents. Another word for accent is shading, if that is another word you'd like to use. So what we're just going to do over here, we're going to apply a cell style of, say, heading 1 on our main heading. Right? If we wanted to, we can make it bigger manually, because right now it doesn't seem as big as it should be. It's not taking up the entire cell as it should. So we can always apply a cell style and then manually go and increase the size. So I can use this increase font size command just to make it as big as we would like. We could, if we wanted to save this configuration, a size of 72 with Calibri as our own cell style, if we wanted to do that. So I've just manually made it bigger after applying heading style 1. Then maybe with the subheadings from A6 to A15 and holding down my control button, I can select B6 all the way to O6 and go to cell style. I can maybe apply heading 2 on that specific data. I see that I've forgotten the total cell in cell A17. So let's try to use Format Painter again. I can take one example here. I can take cell A15, go to Format Painter, click on it, then click on A17, your destination, and it gets applied straight away. With these input values from cell B7 to M15, I want to apply a cell style of input, right, to make them stand out as input cells. And just to prepare for the next lesson or the next set of content we're going to deal with, where we do calculations here, I want to just pre-format cells B17 to M17 with the calculation cell style, and N7 to N15 with the calculation cell style. So very quickly you have data formatted. You have something quite professional looking, stands out. We have specific colors being used, specific styles being used to show importance, to show emphasis. So that's something available, cell styles, at any time. The screen tip there tells you a colorful style is a great way to make important data stand out on the sheet. That is, like I said, different to conditional formatting, where we are, yes, highlighting imported values, but we are going to mostly do that according to a criteria, according to a formula, or according to a function. So that covers our cell styles. We are going to continue with this particular worksheet, and we're now moving on to our next topic. So if I just go to my set of objectives here, so we are going to be seeing inside our category of define and referenced named ranges. I'm going to talk about what is a named range all about. And we're going to specifically focus on your named range. I know we can see name a table, so I'm going to talk about tables in a separate topic altogether. I'm going to specifically look at this particular objective, define a named range. I'm also going to, at the same time, because it makes sense for me to go through it at the same time, in the second last domain, perform operations by using formulas and functions, I'm going to specifically look at reference named ranges. So it is using named ranges as well with formulas and functions, but I'm going to just put that together with our define named range objective over here. And then when we do tables, I'll talk about tables and then how to use named tables in formulas. So I'm going to do that together. So what are named ranges all about, or defined names? We looked at it very briefly in previous videos. We use something called the name box, right? So maybe it brings a memory of what the name box was really telling us. It allowed us to label a specific set of cells or range of cells and give it as meaningful labels instead of using alphabet letters and row numbers to identify specific areas. I would like to give it a meaningful word, of my choice, or maybe a phrase or some sort, so that I can identify it better. So we have something called product category from previous lessons. We have contours or product from previous lessons. Right? So we define these particular names and we use them just for navigation purposes. I could very simply click on one of these defined names and it jumped to that specific cell range very quickly. So then I don't need to go and find out what is that data all about. We're going to take it a step further today where we're looking at defined names in greater detail. We're going to see all the different ways to define a name, and then we're going to use the defined name in a calculation. Ultimately, we want to use it in a calculation. It's great for navigation, right? But one of its main purposes is using it inside a calculation. There are advantages, and there is probably one or two disadvantages to define names, and we'll look at that all in detail. So I want to get a total for N7. So N7 needs to be a total of all the months in this particular worksheet for the country of India. I could very easily do, say, an equals sum. Right? So if I were just to say equals sum, and I can say everything from B7 to M7. So you could see that it took me a few seconds to figure out what is at B7, what is at M7, what is in between. And B7 to M7 will be relevant for this particular worksheet. B7 to M7 might have a different context in another worksheet with new data, different data. So every time we work with data, we take a few seconds to identify what is in the one cell, what is in the other cell, what is in between, to try to make sense of it, get an answer. We may want to replace this B7 to M7 cell selection with a word or something much more familiar. So maybe we would want to call it equals sum India. Right, so what does that mean? That I'm giving this range B7 to M7 a very specific label or name, a defined name as it's called. So it just makes it stand out more. So what are the benefits here? We have a meaningful way of displaying our data, keeps your data very organized, right? Makes it professional. All those particular words that we have there. It just makes sense in our formulas and functions. I don't want to use an arbitrary alphabet letter row number reference every single time. B7 to M7 is quite easy to see, but if that became B700 to M895, for example, just a random selection, we have to take time to go and scroll up and down, left and right, to figure out where are those cells sitting. We have to see the labels, and then we have to then establish what is this all about. Maybe if I had it defined, then I can see, great, it refers to India. Maybe I could rename this to give it a more specific name. I could maybe say India sales, right? So sum of India sales. Maybe I can even say sum of India monthly sales. If you want to be even more specific, then we can really make it out quite well. And it gets us the same answer. So we'll still see B7 to M7 being calculated. But we have rather in the formula a much more easy to see and easy to understand label. So there are various ways to get this data defined. In order to use this word India, or in order to use the words India monthly sales, I need to get this range of B7 to M7 defined. So we saw the first method was using the name box. So we're going to try that using the name box. So the first thing you need to do is select your data from B7 to M7. Click and drag those particular cells. We go to the name box. Let us give it the name we saw just now. I want to call it India monthly sales. Right, and I push enter. If you type it out as India space monthly space sales, you'll get an error that says you must enter a valid reference you want to go to, or type a name for the selection. So that means you need to make use of underscores to replace your space in a name. So no spaces allowed when creating a name. You could keep the words together, so you could say something like India monthly sales, like that. Right? If you want to make much more sense of it, if you want to make it much more clearer to read, then you may want to replace your spaces with underscores. So shift and the dash key between the words will get you your representation of a space, and we just push enter. And it seems like something has happened. Maybe you were expecting a confirmation message. Maybe you wanted to see, great, did the name actually work? Did the name get defined? So a very quick way to just double check. It's an optional step you may want to take, but it's a good idea just to know that we have defined it correctly. If we just click away randomly, we go to the name box, we go to the drop down on the right hand side, we see India monthly sales available. We click on that particular name. It should highlight, it should select B7 to M7. Okay, so that's the way to check if your name actually worked. So very quickly to check. There are other ways to check that, but just to see inside your name box, it's visible. Visible is not only enough, we should actually select it, because we don't want additional cells to be selected when we want to actually make use of it in a formula. Let's say you were clicking and dragging and accidentally selected another cell. We have a blank cell N7 also selected, and then you go and define it, and then you go use it in a function like this. You're actually going to get a circular reference error where we're trying to add a cell where the actual formula even exists. Right, so it's not actually going to work out. That really means that we're going to get an error and it becomes a problem. So we need to make sure our cell selection is carefully done, and then we give it a name. Double check by going to the drop down, selecting India monthly sales, and we have the correct cell selection. So the name box can be used to define a name. It is a great way to define names going in for data going in all sorts of directions. So you can define data going horizontally, it can be vertically, it can be a whole selection from one point to the other diagonally as well. We have to give our own name over here, right? So we have the opportunity to give our own name. We have to make sure we spell it correctly. If we make a mistake with names, what happens? Well, we do have the undo button available. We could possibly go back, right? I discourage the use of the undo button. We may want to use what is called the name manager to go and make your corrections, right? It's a nice summary view of all your names. We're going to look at that in a moment, but it's probably better to go and do it through there, just to double check that you are redefining the name or spelling the name correctly for the specific cells. So there are multiple ways, but I do recommend you make use of the name manager for that, which you'll see in a moment. So using the name box, a name was defined. We can also use a method called define name. In our formulas tab, define names group, we have this option called define name, and we can select our data. Again, this time I'm going to select B8 to M8. I'm going to choose this define name command over here, and we have a box popping up giving us options for our names here. So it has, in a way, guessed that United Kingdom has is the particular name for this data. It may work right now. It may not always work. So this is just some sort of good guess. It's picked up there's a label on the left-hand side. Possibly that's the label that you'd like to use for this name as well. So we want to keep it if you want to keep it, or we may want to change it. It gives you the opportunity to change the name here as well. We can see the space has been replaced by an underscore too. We then want to see a setting called scope. So scope actually means, how does Excel know that this name is not going to cause problems in the future if I try to use it twice? Can I use a name twice? Can I use it more than once anywhere? How does a clash or duplicate name happen, or how does Excel deal with it? Well, Excel won't allow you to create duplicates. It won't allow you to create this clash situation. And for that to be properly configured, we need to make sure our scope is set correctly. So we have a scope of workbook. We have a scope of specific worksheet names as well. So right now, scope has been set to workbook. And what that means is, in this workbook of multiple worksheets, I can only use the defined name United Kingdom once. I cannot use it again. So if I wanted to open up a brand new worksheet, I select a set of data, a range of cells, and I want to call it United Kingdom. I won't be able to do that because the scope of workbook has been selected. You have exhausted all possible attempts to use United Kingdom ever again. And if you do want to change that, if you think you need to use United Kingdom, the name United Kingdom, just the way as you see it right here, if you need to use it again, you may want to limit its scope to a specific worksheet. So let's say I kept it to monthly data. That means I can make use of the words United Kingdom in the monthly data worksheet. I then am able to use it again in another worksheet. So I can open up a brand new worksheet, put in a new set of cells, and I can then define my name, call it United Kingdom. I can open up another worksheet and call that set of cells United Kingdom as well. Just note that at any point in time, at any given point, we can only define a name with that particular set of words once. So you can use United Kingdom once in the monthly data worksheet. You cannot use it again. You can define it once in the all product sales worksheet. You cannot use it again. And so you just have one opportunity to use that name in that specific worksheet. However, this scope setting the scope to a certain worksheet gives you the opportunity to use the name again in another worksheet as opposed to the workbook scope where you could not use it ever again. You cannot use it at all in another worksheet. So we may have a problem here. Let's say if I wanted to define the total column and the total row here, I can't use the words total more than once, right? So I will be having a problem over here because I want to call N7 to N15 total, and then I also want to call B17 to M17 total. That's not going to happen, right? We can't use the same word more than once, even if it's for a different set of cells. So you may want to rename those particular words to give it more meaning, to differentiate those particular cells. So maybe you want to call the first one country totals, or country totals, and then the second set monthly totals. So you are differentiating them. You're making it stand out, making it look different. Yes, they're both totals, but one is referring to country, one is referring to month. So the scope will allow you to choose if you want to make use of this particular name ever again somewhere else. We're going to keep it to workbook. We're not changing it right now. The comment is something optional that you want to put in. It just gives yourself an idea, or somebody else some sort of understanding. Why did you call B8 to M8 the name United Kingdom? So for the purposes of this training, I'm just going to put a certain piece of comment inside here. So I'm just going to say over here, these are the monthly sales for the country of United Kingdom. Right, so just some extra information for the reader or for yourself to understand what is the purpose of this defined name. And then we can see it refers to monthly data, the worksheet B8 to M8 with dollar signs. I'll be looking at more of dollar signs in a later topic, but for this purpose, what does it mean? B8 to M8, when it has these dollar signs appearing inside our cell references, we are locking down a certain range, or we specifically indicating that we are exclusively calling B8 to M8 United Kingdom. Nothing other than those cells will be called United Kingdom. So that's that particular selection done there for us. All we do from here is we push OK. Again, looks like something has happened. Maybe we don't know if this defined name worked. So we just click away, go to the name box. We see United Kingdom. We click on United Kingdom. It will select the data B8 to M8. And the last selection or the last method we would like to use is called create from selection. So create from selection is a much more smarter way of selecting your data and getting it defined. What it will do here, it will make use of the cells labels if available for the name as well. And for this to work, we need to select the label including the data. So all we're doing here is that we're going to tell Excel, for this data B9 to M9, make use of the label A9 as a defined name. For this method here, you need to make sure you have labels on the left-hand side. You need to have labels on the top. It could be on the right-hand side. It could be even at the bottom. This doesn't give you the opportunity to put your own name. However, you need to have a name or a label actually available so it can be converted to a name as such. So I select my data A9 to M9, Formulas tab, and inside your defined names group, I have create from selection. So I select create from selection. We will then see a box appearing, a dialog box, create names from values in the what? It says left column. So left column has been ticked or checked, which means that it has identified that this label in A9 will be used for the name for cells B9 to M9. And all we do over here, we just push OK. And again, we double check, click away, go to the drop down, United States is available. We click on United States. We see that only B9 to M9 is selected, the data. We don't have the label selected. The label is not part of the data, it's representing the data. So this is a much quicker method to get names defined, provided that you have labels appearing. And this only works for data going horizontally or vertically. Right? You can't really use create from selection over here for diagonal data or for data that use both rows and columns, because it won't really know what label to pick. Does your label exist in the top row, left column, bottom row, or right column? Neither. We don't have any specific label that can serve that purpose there. Right. So we will only use create from selection for that particular way of how the data has been laid out. So very quickly, I'm just going to get this data defined over here. So I'm using create from selection. I know that I've seen a whole lot of other people, you can probably select all of this data here, create from selection. It'll automatically get your names defined. All right, but I just want to double check each time that I'm doing this correctly. Right, so just it's the way I actually do it, the way I teach it, is that we do it one by one over here for small data. Right, so I do understand for small data, I can do this. For much larger data, probably not worth the time to actually go and click and drag one by one and go to create from selection each time. We could have just simply do this, select from A7 to M15, create from selection. It would have created the names with the specific data for each row. But I just want to double check, for each of my countries here, I do have them available. If I did make my data selection correct, then I wouldn't have any specific problems showing up here. So the names have been defined, right? So maybe I want to also get names defined for my months here. So I can select B6 to B15, and I can go to create from selection. Top row is ticked, and I can just push OK. And I can probably do the same for each of these as well. I'll just spend a few seconds doing that. So there's no limit as such to how many names you create, right? That depends on where you need to use it. Gets your data quite organized. We do have a lot of names here that we may need to use, but there are different ways, again, to make use of the names inside our calculations. So there is more than one way to make use of a name in a calculation other than typing things out manually. And again, we're going to see that as well. So I have everything selected and defined. So I have quite a lot of names listed in here. So one for each month, one for each of the countries that I have here. So we have many different names. We can select any one of these at any time, and we can see that specific data for that particular month or even for that particular country. I actually now want to see a summary of all of my names. So I have what is called the name manager here. In my formulas tab, the defined names group name manager will show you all the names you have in your workbook. It has the value behind that name. What does it refer to? The scope, if available. And we'll see here, there's our comment that I made earlier for United Kingdom. These are the monthly sales for the country of the United Kingdom. So that's where your comment would actually appear. Just one note on scope. When we are looking at the other methods, such as name box and create from selection, we have a default scope of workbook. Right? So if we do want to change the scope of a specific set of data, we can only use this define name method. We cannot change the scope in any of the other methods here. And if we do, let's say, want to modify something, so I have options to create a new name, edit a name, delete a name. I want to modify a name. Let's say I want to reduce the name for one of these particular sales selections here. So maybe let's take India monthly sales again. And I just want to actually give it the country name, just like how I have given it to everything else here. I can select my name. I can push the edit button. I'm given the opportunity to give it a new name. So I can select monthly sales. I can just remove that extra portion. I can give it a comment if I want to. So I'm presented with this particular method define name. You'll see that scope has been grayed out, right, for very good reasoning that we don't want to be able to very quickly change a scope. It would actually be quite disastrous. Excel hasn't given us that opportunity here. It would result in some sort of crash. But let's say, for example, you had this named range called India, and you set it to a specific worksheet. You set the scope to a worksheet, and then you created a new worksheet and you used India again. But now let's say you want to make that scope of India in that worksheet to workbook. You can imagine what will happen. There will be a clash of names because now you have used India already in a previous worksheet, and all of a sudden now you want to change the scope to workbook. Excel won't really know what to do. So for that reasoning, the scope has been grayed out. If you do want to change a scope, you need to delete a name and start over. So I'll come to that in a moment. So let's say this is all I want to do. I just push OK. Those changes get saved. From here, I can create a new name if I like. I just need to give the values, choose a scope, a comment. What does it refer to? Right, and we can give it a name from here. I can choose to delete a name if I wanted to, but we have to be very careful with deletion of names. If we go and delete a name, it can have quite large consequences. And actually, I can see the errors already showing up here because I did make some changes to this worksheet. That if you try and delete a name, it's not going to go back to what it was before. So let me give you this example here. I renamed B7 to M7 India. Right, so before it was B7 to M7, I made it to India. I defined the name. If I remove the name India here, it's not going to go back to B7 to M7. It won't go back to the cell references to what it was before. Instead, you'll get that horrible error. Here's your hashtag ref. That's a hash ref exclamation mark. And that tells you that it doesn't know what cell reference it's looking at or what it needs to use for the sum function to work correctly. And so we want to avoid this sort of error at any cost. And if we then delete our names, we will get that specific error. And that can have consequences where, let's say you used equals sum India in 10 cells across your worksheet all over the place, a formula within a formula. Other cells relied on that particular cell. And as soon as this name gets deleted, everything stops working. Everything just stops, right? And you get hash ref exclamation mark errors everywhere. Right? And we really don't want that situation. So be very careful. Even Excel gives you a little warning here. Are you sure you want to delete the name? So be extremely careful when you want to delete a name. It's going to be quite disastrous. And then you have to redefine it, make sure the formulas work again correctly, etc. All right, so this is the name manager. Allows you to make changes to your names. You can create new names, delete them, just have a good view of all of them. If someone knows how to use defined names, they'll come to this name manager first to see if you have used any defined names. Pushing close here saves your changes. You can even use a name box here to see if any names have been created. And let me see India. I've selected or renamed India here. It will still select B7 to M7. No change to content whatsoever. Ultimately, I want to use my defined names inside this function here, so of N7. So I can start off, first of all, by doing our commonly used auto sum. right? Excel's guessing mechanism. We choose the numbers we need to use for a certain calculation. I need to add up these values. So in my formulas tab, function library, I have the sigma sign for AutoSum. I also have in the home tab, in the editing group, the sigma sign for AutoSum. So I can select AutoSum. We can see that B7 to M7 has been selected for me automatically. And names are given preference. So we have the defined name India showing up in the set of brackets where we would usually have the cell references showing up. We just double check that this is the correct selection, and we just push enter to make this column bigger, and we can see that the calculation has been done. I now have a much more meaningful function inside here. I see equals sum of India, which refers to the monthly sales for the country of India. Remember, we applied a cell style of calculation on this particular set of cells. So we can see the color is standing out really well, making it quite unique compared to the data that I have on the left-hand side here. And then what we would normally do, we would normally go to the bottom right-hand corner, cell N7, click and drag down, right? And we come across a problem here. The problem is that we have now these cells here repeating itself. And so it's taking whatever was inside cell N7 and copying it down all the way down here. Right? So we can't really fill the series. We can't see that we can repeat the pattern. We have copy cells, right? And why is this actually happening? Let us actually go and find it out. We can go to the Formulas tab. Remember, we were looking at Show Formulas earlier. It is a view to see what is happening behind the scenes, what is happening in the cell. We could also use Control and the left apostrophe next to the number 1 row on your keyboard. And we can see the formula inside N7 to N15. It shows up as equals sum India. And what is the problem here? Well, remember when we were looking at our name manager and we were looking at any of these names here, when we were looking at the define name method in the define names group, we saw the dollar signs appearing. So the dollar sign effect is over here actually, it's locking down this specific range. So it's locking down B7 to M7 and making use of that in all the cells going down. So you essentially, whatever was locked down here is going to be copied all the way down. That's one disadvantage then, because well, if you're very used to repeating this pattern here, using relative references, which we'll also look at in another topic, then it becomes quite tedious to actually do a calculation for every row that we have here. I have to do a separate calculation here, separate calculation here. There's no real way actually to get Excel to figure out that there's a name over here, there's a name over here, and make use of the name inside each of these cells over here. So we have to do this manually. So let me go back and do that. So we can just do it for first few examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. All right, practice in your own time. Have a question, come back to me about it. So we can use AutoSum if it's laid out in that way. We can even say equals sum, open brackets, and I can physically type out the name United Kingdom, so UNIT. So we can see that this box is popping up over here. It's actually asking me which names would you like to use, which functions would you like to use. I can use my arrow keys to navigate through this. I can find my name over here, and you can see that with a screen tip, it shows you what it's all about. I can either double click on the name, United Kingdom, or I can just push the tab button on my keyboard to tab that specific name in, and I can just close my brackets. Good practice, and we can push enter, and the total has been set in. The last way to get my define names in is in the Formulas tab, Define Names group. I have this drop down called Use in Formula. Because the reality is we have so many names we need to use. I'm not going to probably remember all of them whenever I need to use them. So I can very easily choose from this list over here a name that I'd like to use specifically. So all I need to do though first, I need to first put in my function equals sum open brackets. I can then see that the use in formula command is available in the formulas tab, define names group, and I would choose the name that I like to use. I need to select the name United States here. So select United States, it puts it in for me, right? Populates it for me inside the brackets. I just need to close my brackets, push enter, and the total is put in place for me. So again, 3 ways to get your totals in or to get a function calculate with a name. You can use auto sum if it's going to be any of these functions here. We can manually put it in and type out the name manually if we know it, or we can use this use in formula dropdown in our formulas tab, define names group. Just remember, at any point we can't use the name box when we are inside a function. Just to be clear here, if let's say for n10 I said equals sum open brackets and I try to pick a name from here, you'll see something else actually showing up here. So if you want to use a name, we must go to use in formula and choose one of these names over here, right? And it will allow us to get that calculation done. So I'm just going to leave it here. It will take some time to actually get this done. So that is everything to do with define names. In the exam, they may ask you to define a name using any of the methods. That's up to you, which method you want to use. They can even ask you to use a specific method. They will ask you to use the name in a function or a formula. Okay, so you may already have names available. A good idea is to double check in the name box or go to the name manager to see if any names are currently there, because you do want to make use of names specifically for the exam to test your knowledge, to test your skills on named ranges instead of alphabet letters and row numbers. It's not that they're going to completely take away the concept of alphabet letters and row numbers. That's still very much relevant. Defined names don't always work when we would like to use them. So just remember, you can do it both ways. You can still say equals sum B10 to M10. You can say equals sum Australia, right? But remember, you can only use the names if you have them defined. They won't work straight away. It's a good idea to get them defined first. In the exam, they may ask you to define it and then use it. Please follow the instructions. Don't define the name if it doesn't ask you to define it. And so it will be very specific when it actually asks you that question. So make sure that you read your question carefully when you want to actually make use of defined names. So that is your section, define names. It took us quite a while. It is quite a big section. It is quite quite a popular question in an exam situation. And in your when we're doing our work with defined names, we pretty much use it everywhere. I teach it in my Excel intermediate course. It's the first topic of the day, because we then make use of the defined names in every application, every exercise going forward. So we try to see its multiple uses. This is one use over here in a spreadsheet like this, where I have rows and columns of data and headings, and I can get some totals done here. It is also very much used when we are creating tables, when we are creating pivot tables, when we are creating any sort of report. Defined names are much more easier to use in those elements rather than a massive selection of cells. So we will see more of this in other applications, in other questions when we need to make use of them. Moving on, we look at a section here called Sparklines. Right, so inserting Sparklines. We're going to see how do we apply Sparklines, what are Sparklines all about. We still have some time for that. And we probably will also have time to look at conditional formatting as well. What Sparklines actually do, it is a charting tool that allows us to draw a line chart, a column chart, or even a chart called win-loss inside the cell itself. Right, so this is found under the Insert tab, Sparklines group. We have line, column, win-loss. So if we want to plot a chart in a cell, what does that actually mean? I can see the performance for these values here. Let's say I want to see how well did the months do according for this country, according to this country of India. I could really create a standard chart. I could really draw in a normal line chart and see it. But I actually want to see a performance comparison per country. And so I would maybe be able to create a couple of pivot tables and some line charts there. I could create a standard static line charts, do my comparisons. But your Sparklines really stand out here quite well, where if you want to see individual country performance graphically or visually, and you do want to compare it to other data going all the way down, or you could even have it going across here, you can then actually make use of a Sparkline. So we have a line Sparkline, we have a column Sparkline, we have win-loss, and win-loss is really great if you want to show performance for positive and negative values. So if you had negative performing data, you could essentially have some invisible number line drawn, and anything above or positive will appear as blocks, as you can see inside this icon here. For win-loss, anything which is positive will appear at the top. Anything appearing negative will appear at the bottom. So it shows performance in that particular way quite well. But we're just going to insert a line Sparkline. We can also insert a column Sparkline. Just trying to get one Sparkline in. It's very simple actually. You just choose your destination cell. We are choosing here 07. We are going to go to the Insert tab, Sparklines group. We choose line. All it asks us over here, choose your data. What is the data range? We can already see the location range has been set to 07. That's where it's going to be. So all we do here, select our data, select cells B7 to M7. Picked up, there's a defined name that uses that first. And all we do is just we push OK. And there's your Sparkline drawn in for you, showing you specific performance for different months. When were the peaks? When were where were the troughs? Your high points, your low points. Works out very well. And this is probably the only chart that you can actually use where we have the clicking and dragging functionality available. So I have over here the bottom right hand corner green square. I can click and drag this down, and it will draw in the specific charts for me, for each of the months data that I have over here. So we can actually have a look over here. Let's edit this data here. See, so it's picking up India. So we see there is a problem. That same problem that we saw before, it's picking up India for this data. So then what I may want to do, just so that this works as expected, right? So I'm going to temporarily, I'm just going to remove the defined names India, United Kingdom, and United States. And so let me go to my formulas tab, my name manager. I can just remove this particular defined name. I can remove this one here and this one here. You can actually see straight away that you're getting an error. It doesn't actually pick up. There's not, instead of the hash ref error, it says hash name. Doesn't pick up what name we need to be using over here. So very quickly, I can just put equals sum, get this selected, put that in, right? Get my values back in, do that, right? And I can probably drag it all the way down to complete it for this Sparkline activity. Going back to our Sparkline cell here of 07, this destination, I can go insert, line Sparkline, choose my data range. I push OK. And then if I try and click and drag this down, there we go. It looks actually better. We can see now different trends showing up for each of the countries, how well each of the countries did. You can see my manual editing done over here. We did this in a previous activity where we inserted rows. We typed in our own dummy data. That's the reason for this really straight line and this drop afterwards here. So with Sparklines, as soon as you do the one, you can click and drag and get it done for the rest. Right, so very easily we can get this inside. We do have formatting options, right? So we do have another contextual tab here called Sparkline, where we can choose very specific elements we'd like to apply formatting. I have the ability to apply specific colors if I wanted to. And so I can change my colors. I can choose very specific colors from the color palette. I can make it a specific weight if I wanted to. What I also probably may want to put in are something called markers. Right? In the show group in your Sparkline contextual tab, if I tick or check the box markers, it will pinpoint for me accurately where are all of these values actually, where are those values in the line chart itself. Right, so really great way to make this data stand out. Let me change this to a specific type of style over here. If you wanted to put high points in, low points, if available, negative points. Right, so it just makes it stand out quite well when we are trying to make sense of this. We're trying to analyze it, trying to make decisions from this. So when we insert these, we can put them in as a line chart. I can very easily change this to a column. If I wanted to show performance via a bar chart sort of functionality, right? We could put it to win-loss, but we won't really see much of anything happening here because everything is really positive here. So line chart, in my opinion, works at best. We can see that those trends happening quite well. So in the exam, they might ask you to just take some data, apply a Sparkline in a very specific cell. You may need to click and drag downwards. And what we're ending off, we're going to end off with conditional formatting. So with conditional formatting, we're going to apply it to the data over here that I have inside this monthly data worksheet. So just to make sure this works out quite effectively, I'm going to remove the current shading from B7 to M15. I'm just going to go to my home tab, cell style. I'm just going to apply a normal style, right, back to what it was before. I just want to make sure currency is put back in place. Right, that was one way to get all the formatting removed as well. Actually, another way, really, technically, because we saw clear formats earlier. So clear formats can be used. A normal cell style can be used. That removes all your formatting in one go. Right, technically, the technical or most correct to remove formatting is clear formats. Right, even though it may have been alternative to use a cell style, you're still technically applying formatting when using the normal cell style. If you want to remove all formatting, you would use clear formats. So I want to use conditional formatting. And what is conditional formatting? Just to see its definition, easily spot trends and patterns in your data using bars, colors, and icons to visually highlight important values. Right, so this is according to a criteria. We were looking at cell styles earlier where we could apply specific colors on our data, but this is not really working according to a criteria. Maybe it is a criteria that I have specifically chosen manually and I'm applying it, but what if I want to apply formatting according to a criteria set out inside a specific area, and it must then automatically figure out that which data is meeting this criteria and only highlight those specific values. Let's just use New Zealand, for example. Right, so let's say in this New Zealand data here, I want to use a target of 500,000 rands. Right, so everything above 500,000 rands must be colored in a very specific way. We could use green, we could use another color to show performance. So maybe I want to reward those employees who have achieved a target of 500,000 Rand for selling something really well in the country of New Zealand. So I have set a target of 500,000. I just want Excel to highlight all those particular months where we actually did sales more than 500,000 Rand. So using conditional formatting, first of all, I selected my cells B11 to M11. Go to conditional formatting, go to highlight cell rules. So you're looking at a rule called highlight cell rule, and we're choosing the rule called greater than. Right, so it's a preset function here, greater than, and gives me a dialog box here that asks me, what would you like to provide here as a value? Format cells that are greater than what? We just specify the amount of 500,000 Rand, just as a number. We don't need to put any formatting. We don't need to put any currency symbols or any other formatting. We just put the number, and we choose a color of our choice. So we can pick one of these predefined colors, so green fill, so green background with dark green text or dark green font. And I can push OK. And you can see that Excel looks through this data, sees which data is larger than or greater than 500,000, and it will only take those values which are larger than 500,000 and color them in green for me. So great way to really show your trends, show patterns, show performance using conditional formatting. So that's just really one way to get conditional formatting in. We just have so many rules available. There's greater than, less than, between, equal to, text that contains. We have duplicate values. So duplicate values is very interesting. If I want to highlight my duplicate values and I want to just make sense of which are the duplicate values, so I can maybe remove them or I can deal with them, then it colors in the duplicate values for you, and then you can then decide what needs to be done. Why am I being very specific on that? It's because we have, under the Data tab, we have a command here that allows us to remove duplicates. But the problem with this command here, under the Data tab, Data Tools, is that it doesn't really show you which cells are duplicates. It just removes it for you automatically. Maybe you want to take that extra step first to see which cells are duplicate. So it highlights the cells, and then as soon as it's highlighted, then you can choose to remove the duplicates if you wanted to. So that's that option there. We then have top-bottom rules. So top-bottom rules, if you want to show top 10 performing items, bottom 10 performing items in the form of a percentage, something above average, something below average. We then have data bars, color scales, icon sets. So if we want to very specifically choose one of these predefined conditional formatting options, it just takes the data and using its own mechanisms, it will apply certain conditional formatting on top of the data. So let's say, for example, I want to see for India, I want to apply a data bar of this gradient fill to show performance. Maybe data going across doesn't do really well. Let's rather do data going downwards. So for all the countries for January, I want to see which country performed the best. So I can say conditional formatting data bars, and we can say let's use this gradient green data bar fill here. So we can see that Brazil did quite well for the month of January compared to all of the other countries here. I could do something similar for color scales. So I can apply this green, yellow, red color scale. And then I can see that South Africa didn't do really well over here, and then some other countries did exceptionally well. We do have something in between, some shades of yellows and greens quite close to each other. And so it shows performance quite instantly. It just really takes the high values, the low values, everything in between, puts a certain color to it. We could even use something like your icon sets. So these are some fancy looking icons available here. to show performance. So green upwards could be positive, red downwards could be something not favorable, something going across could be in between. So I could apply 3 arrows colored, and you can see that it's showing performance in very specific ways. I have just so many different types. I have conditional formatting, icon sets, I have shapes available. I could even apply one of these indicators if I wanted to. So in the exam, how would they ask this? They will ask you to take specific data and apply one of these rules over here. It's important that you know which of these rules to apply in terms of its names, right? So if they say blue data bar, then you must make sure that you know what blue data bar is, right? So we have blue data bar here, but we also have blue data bar here. It will be very specific in the exam to tell you if it's a gradient fill or a solid fill that you need to apply. Even these colors over here, it may ask you to apply according to a certain color scale. It may ask you according to a certain icon set. Right? So just remember to, when you move your mouse over any of these, it will tell you the name instantly. And you want to then make sure you apply the correct conditional formatting on top of that data. Just to maybe have a look at again, let's say top and bottom rules. I want to see the top 10 performing countries, or let's say top 3 performing countries for the month of December. I can then go to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, or rather top bottom rules, top 10 items. This 10 can be changed to a 3 if I wanted to. I can also choose my own colors. So under custom format, I can go to this custom format command. I have the option to change the font color if I wanted to. I can change the fill color, which is the background color, choose my own colors from here. So go to more colors, choose something from the color palette over here. So let's say I want to pick this particular shade over here, and I just push OK, and I just push OK. So then it applies those specific colors for me and shows me the performance, the top 3 performing countries for the month of December. So in the exam, they can ask you to apply specific colors. So you just need to be aware that it can be any one of these rules. It can be any of these predefined rules, and you need to apply the colors according to the values, according to the targets as specified. Right. At this point, we don't look at new rules. Right? So if you want to really create something from scratch according to your own formula, that comes in later topics. We just want to be able to make use of these built-in conditional formatting rules where it tells you to. If we do want to remove conditional formatting, right, we may be asked to do that as well. We have clear rules. So I could select my cells. Let's say I selected these cells over here, and I can then go to conditional formatting, clear rules. I can choose to clear the rules from the selected cells. Right, removes conditional formatting from the cells. I can even choose to remove the rules from the entire worksheet. It gets rid of all the conditional formatting that I currently applied. I can also clear rules by going to manage rules. Right, we have this dialog box showing up, and I can then have a specific selection done and get the rules removed. Right, or say, for example, I selected these cells here from D7 to D15, conditional formatting, manage rules. I can choose to clear very specific rules over here. And so I may want to remove, this particular second rule. So I can choose that particular rule, push delete, push apply, push OK, right? And that specific rule has then been deleted. So familiarize yourself with the conditional formatting options we have, the clear rules functionality, manage rules as well. And what does conditional formatting do for me? It allows you to spot your trends and patterns, measure performance using colors So it's using criteria, using functions and formulas very specifically to get that in. And with that, it's the end of our lesson. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you found that very useful. We continue with our next domain in the next video. So the next time around, we'll be looking at our tables. Right, so everything to do with tables will be discussed in the next video. We may even possibly move on to the next domain as well, using formulas and functions. And then just not forgetting that we do look at name a table with respect to this particular objective that we did skip out on. All right, but other than that, you will find this video on my YouTube channel afterwards. Thank you again for attending the lesson.